Edition of Birds 365 with Birds Insider John McMullen. I'm Joe Kraus sitting in the big chair, and as we move into Masters Thursday today, John, I want to begin the show first with a huge big thank you to our pal Jody Mack, who went co-host with you for the first 3 years of Birds 365, and when I spoke to Jody the other day, he wasn't going to miss getting up at 6:30. He wasn't going to miss booking the guest all the time, but he was going to miss working with John McMullen.
Yeah, I appreciate that from Jody. And, you know, it was a lot of fun. I got to do this show with him for 3 years, you know, and we throw the word around legend. And probably a little bit too much, but in the world of sports talk radio, Jody McDonald is a true legend. He's been doing it for a very long time. And yeah, Jody, you know, people used to love when we argued, thought we were angry at each other, but yeah, you know, as soon as the show ended, we were friends, never anything like that. I appreciate everything he's done for me and everything he's done for this show. Just tremendous. You can't say enough good things about Jody McDonald.
No doubt about it. He will be missed on Birds 365. And even though there is always change in the world, there are certainly, you certainly become part of the memory and part of the history as Birds 365 continues to roll forth. So, Jody Mack, you're probably not seeing this message of thanks or salute to you as we begin the show. You're sleeping, but we'll play it back for you. Good stuff. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and being a part of Birds 365. I'll ride shotgun today and tomorrow with Johnny Mack. Johnny Mack, the Eagles home, or not the home opener, but the Eagles.
It is the home opener. It just
it is the home opener. It is now decided.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like it. You know, Jody and I, we would go back and forth about, and we whittled it down to two teams, Green Bay and Cleveland. He won that one. I thought it would be Cleveland from the perspective of, I thought the Eagles would push for Cleveland because they're giving up a home game, right? So, you know, if you think about it from the perspective of competitive advantage, which is a big thing with Nick Sirianni, it's becoming a lesser thing with Jeffrey Lurie as he gets more involved into the business end of the equation. But I mean, the Packers are in the NFC and they're supposed to be a playoff contender next year. And you're giving up a home game against Green Bay that would have been at Lincoln Financial Field. And you can imagine if you fast forward to week 18 and the Packers beat the Eagles in Sao Paulo, Brazil, there's no guarantee the Eagles were going to beat them in Lincoln Financial Field. But my point is, it's a home game. It's easier to win at home than in a neutral field, neutral site, where the Eagles are an early 1.5 favorite. But yeah, I can see that being a talking point down the line if everything sort of unfurls that particular way. But Jeffrey Lurie's changed a lot. We talked this with Les Bowen the other day, and Les has been around Jeffrey for basically the entire quarter century plus. I only got back in 2016-ish. And he was against this kind of stuff for a long, long time. The international games, he didn't want to give up Eagles home games and all that kind of stuff. Now, sometimes you have to. The league has put things in place where teams have to do it at some point. But you know, Jeffrey would always beg off as much as possible. And now he just spoke at the annual NFL meetings, and you saw a different Jeffrey Lurie understands that maybe, you know, if the league wants to continue to grow at the level it's been growing, they have to open up international markets and maybe from a big picture standpoint, the NFL, it's more important to have Eagles, Packers, two marquee teams for the first game in Brazil than it is to have a home game, at least. Yeah, but fans aren't going to agree with that. let's face it, Krause, most Eagles fans aren't going to Brazil, so they're losing a home game. But that's the way of the world. Revenue. How do you open up more revenue streams? And the NFL is looking to do that in international markets.
John, excuse the ignorance of this question, but did the Eagles have a say in the opponent? Was that a conversation between the team and the league when that game was being decided?
Yeah, I mean they have a say. I mean the league ultimately is going to do what they want to do, but in the past, Jeffrey, as I said, has been pushed back pretty hard. I don't get the sense that he pushed back hard on this particular instance. And Cleveland is a marquee team as well. They're a playoff team. They're getting Deshaun Watson back. They project to be a pretty good team on the AFC side as well. Their fans travel pretty well, so. But they're not the Packers. The Packers are one of those, really top 5 probably teams in the league from a branding standpoint, and a lot of that has to do with going through 30 years of consecutive Hall of Fame quarterback play with Brett Favre seamlessly into Aaron Rodgers, and now they're into Jordan Love, and he looks really good. I'm not going to put him in the Hall of Fame, but he had a great first season as a starting quarterback. It's a very high-profile team, and clearly the NFL wants to make a splash with their first game in Brazil. And I don't think the Eagles had much of a say, because if they did, they probably would have picked Cleveland for the reasons I gave you. I mean, it's just common sense. If they're not going to be battling Cleveland for a playoff spot, you never want to lose an NFL game because there's only 17 of them. But we always talk, if you're going to lose a game, it's better to lose an out of conference game, because it's not going to hurt you nearly as much in tiebreakers and things like that.
It's a Friday night game, John. Is it earlier this year than what it normally would be? September 5th, I think, is the scheduled date for the game. So it would be previous to what would be the normal Thursday night kickoff for the NFL, which would be the following Thursday. Am I right with that?
I haven't. Well, the kickoff game is still going to be Thursday. This is going to be the second game of the season. It's not the kickoff game, but I haven't looked at the calendar. That generally just has to do with the calendar and where it is and where Labor Day is and all that kind of stuff. So I haven't looked at that just yet, but I don't think it's they moved it up for a particular game. They just would have played their normal Friday before after the Thursday game and before the Sunday game. So that part of it
that just seems early to me. That would put the Thursday game on the 4th of September,
September
and Labor
5th.
Day would be the 8th of September. So is it a pre-start to the season before Labor Day this year?
You know better than I if you looked at the calendar. So yeah, if Labor Day is on the 8th, yeah.
Take a quick peek here.
I mean, if from the perspective of the league pushing back the Super Bowl as far as it does, remember eventually they want to get to 18 games. So
and Labor Day is the 2nd, so I am corrected.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Labor Day is
Day
is the 2nd, so that Thursday, and then this will be game 2.
So it's Labor Day is a little bit earlier this year, so they generally start right after Labor Day. So that part hasn't changed. That's just what the calendar is this year.
And Eagle fans will have 7 home games that they will be able to attend, and then 9 games on the road, plus the game in Brazil. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, I think the Eagles have the extra home game this year. I can pull that up because remember it's an unbalanced schedule. So when they went to 17 games, and eventually they'll try to go to 18. it'll be balanced, somewhat balanced again. It's never balanced, but you get my point. So their home games are obviously Dallas, Giants, Washington, Atlanta, Carolina, Green Bay's a home game, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. So yeah, they have the extra home game this year. So they will still have 8 home games at Lincoln Financial Field. Their 9th home game they've given up for San Paulo. So that part of it helps a little bit. You're still going to get eight home games, but again, other than the Dallas Cowboys, for obvious reasons, maybe Pittsburgh because of the interstate rivalry and that kind of thing. It's probably the biggest home game, and I would argue it is the biggest home game after Dallas. Green Bay does come in here a ton, and as I said, a marquee opponent. So, yeah, I don't love the international games, but the league wants to open revenue, so you got to be a team player if you're Jeffrey Lurie.
We'll see what happens. We'll certainly see what happens, and I don't know how many Eagle fans are going to travel to Brazil, John. I don't even know if you're going to travel to Brazil.
Well, for everyone, you not only got to get your passports up to date, you got to get a visa if you're from what I've been told. So yeah, that's going to be a cluster. You know what? They are playing the first game in Madrid this year, I believe. Yeah, Madrid. I wish the game was in Madrid more than Brazil, but that's just me. What can you do?
8:20 today in the first hour of Birds 365. Bob Brookover will be your guest from NJ.com. I assume the context of the conversation, John, upcoming NFL draft.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today. So we are T minus, you mentioned Masters. We are 2 minus 2 weeks for the NFL draft. And obviously, yeah, that's going to be, it's always big for every NFL team. But from the Eagles' perspective, starting at 22, have 3 picks in the top 53. And then you kind of have the little pause because right now they don't have a 3rd round pick, and they wouldn't pick up again till 120 on day 3. But yeah, the Eagles need to make those first 3 picks count, and we know Howie Roseman is going to move around the board. Just in recent seasons, he's made it a theme for those targeted trades up, whether it's DeVonta Smith, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter last year. Whatever he does, he's got to make those 3 first for day 2 picks, 22, day 1 and day 2, 22 in the first round, 50 and 53. He's got to make them count. And that doesn't mean 3 players. It could be using them to move up to get one player he really wants. In the 2nd round, could be in the 1st round, could use a 2nd round pick to move up, could move down. He hasn't done that recently, but I don't like that spot for the Eagles, 22. I looked at it.
His best picks, John, come well before pick 22.
Well, everybody's do. Part of that is because I hear that a lot. Well, no duh. If you're picking 10th or 9th, that as they traded up, they get, say, DeVonta Smith at 10th and Jalen Carter at 9th last year. Yeah, I mean, you got a better chance to get a better player the higher you are in the draft than you do down in the early 20s.
Well, based on need, based on what you've zeroed in. If you've zeroed in on, hey, we're going to pick an offensive line, we're going to pick an offensive lineman, then you're not as inclined, based on who's picking ahead of you, to make a trade or make a deal to move up to get the lineman, are you?
Well, the Eagles are generally very good, and that's why they always try to, in free agency, they always try to what I call draft-proof the roster and at least have players at each position to where If the board doesn't fall the way you want it to, you can feel somewhat comfortable playing them. It's not perfect, but they generally do it as good as anybody. So that's, they're not going to go into the draft and say, and we're taking an offensive lineman, or we're taking a cornerback, or we're taking insert name. They're, and I say it all the time, and I mentioned it yesterday on the show. Brian Billick's the first one who told me it, but a lot of people have said it over the years. Need is the worst talent evaluator in sports. In other words, if you're just going to pick an offensive lineman because you need an offensive lineman, or you're going to pick a cornerback because you pick a cornerback, and you say so and so is better, but I need a corner, it's probably not going to work out well for you. And the Eagles will not do that. They're one of the smarter teams in the NFL. Even if they have to wait, a lot of people have, it's never sexy when you take an offensive lineman. And there's a ton of good tackles in this draft, set to go in the first round, projected to go in the first round. And you're sitting there with Jordan Mailata, who you just paid $60+ million again. And Lane Johnson's still here playing at a high level. And you say, well, why are you going to take a tackle? It's more from Howie's perspective, Howie Roseman's perspective. It's always about more than 1 year, but also it's about, getting the better player. You're not going to take a lesser player at a position just because you have that need, or you shouldn't. Teams do it all the time, and it generally doesn't work out very well, to be honest.
Well, how does it work, John? You're in the Howie and the brass are in the draft room, and at the top of the whiteboard, they have, or draft board, they've identified players that they like, and they're identified by the position they play or where they should be picked.
But you have a vertical and a horizontal board, and basically when you get to each pick, like we'll take 22 for example. The Eagles understand there's going to be a group of players that aren't going to be there at 22. And they're very cognizant of that, and the understanding that, Marvin Harrison Jr., for instance, you're not going to be there. So you don't have to worry about that. Malik Neighbors, any of the wide receivers, that's in sort of underreported position that they might, go for somewhere in those top 3 picks. But there's certain guys, who aren't going to be there. Generally, you have a cloud of prospects for a particular spot. In this case, it'll be 22. And I'll use the DeVonta Smith year. The Eagles started that year. They actually started at 6, moved back to 12, and then moved back up to 10. But when they were at 12, they had a group of 4 players that they hoped would fall to them at 12. And 3 of them, Jalen Waddle, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, were off the board. And there was only 1 left, DeVonta Smith. And the New York Giants were picking ahead of him. And the Eagles knew that the Giants were going to pick DeVonta Smith. So they traded above the Giants to get the player that they wanted. And they thought there was a drop-off after that. Had they not been able to work out that trade, ironically with Dallas, they might have traded back to the next group of players. And they felt, because you got to match up the evaluation of the player with the evaluation of the spot. And if you think somebody's not worthy of going 22nd, you shouldn't take him at 22nd. So, if their cloud of players that they want at 22 aren't there, or they can't get up to get one, they might consider trading down. So the trick to it all is sort of, but it all comes down to getting the player right. I mean, Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, Andre Dillard. You got to get the player right. And sometimes it's easier said than done.
Hour number 2 of Birds 365. We'll talk more about DeVonta Smith. I think it was Tim McManus that put the story out that the Eagles are now potentially, I guess, looking to sign DeVonta Smith to a long-term deal. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it now, but what do you know? Is it close? Is it far away? Where is that conversation? It's on the front burner, I assume. Whether or not they get there, I don't know.
Well, they want to get it done, but
they want to get it done now, or they want to wait for they want to.
Oh, they always want it. I mean, the Eagles are famous for targeting young players that they think are going to be foundational pieces and trying to extend them early, because they know the price is never going down. It's always going up. And in the case of DeVonta Smith, it's even more obvious where the market's going, because Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are eligible for extensions. So I said it's always in DeVonta. It's in DeVonta's court, obviously. The Eagles want to get this done early and they want to get it done before Jefferson resets the market and Chase resets the market, because the old rising tide lifts all boats, a quote, that as those guys exploded to over 30 million a year average annual value, DeVonta's not going to get that much, but those guys behind them, it will increase what they're going to get. So if DeVonta Smith wants to bet on himself, he can make a lot of money if he waits for Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. On the other hand, if he wants to make life-changing money right now, and he wants it right now, say $25 million a year, the Eagles will probably be willing to sign that today if he would agree to that. So, look, I've said it pretty consistently on the show, if I were DeVonta Smith, I would wait. The Eagles still have the 5th-year option at their disposal. There's no time crunch. With Landon Dickerson, he was a second-round pick, so you only have 4 years. You don't have that 5th-year option. And even the Eagles made him at the time the highest-paid guard in the NFL. But it's a very cost-effective deal. It's just going to keep going up and going up and going up. So the Eagles are willing to give DeVonta Smith a lot of money right now. But if he wants to be Kirk Cousins and squeeze every nickel out of what he can potentially his earning power, he should wait. He should wait, because Justin Jefferson is going to make well over 30 million a year, and Jamar Chase as well. And that will elevate all the players behind them.
As we go to our first break here on Birds 365, I wonder how AJ Brown will react when that's why you use 25.
That
deal comes out.
You can't, Krause, you can't go above 25. And that is the reason why. Because if you go above, we just went through this to not a perfect analogy, but with Hassan Reddick, I would tell Jody all the time, look, Hassan Reddick's not playing for the Philadelphia Eagles for less money than Bryce Huff. So you had to get him over Bryce Huff. AJ's not playing for less money than DeVonta Smith. So you can't go above AJ's money. That makes it more complicated as well.
Bird 365 with John McMullen, Joe Krause sitting in the chair today as we go to our first commercial break. One reminder, and I know Jody has reminded the listening audience or our viewers about Del Val Insurance. I do want to draw your attention to Del Val Insurance. Save up to 40% on your car insurance. No BS. It's real. 215-354-0122. Fran and Jim are the managing partners. Two great guys. I have Del Val Insurance. I have used Del Val Insurance. They are legit, and they are the real deal. Back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!